So today we're going to be using our graphing calculator to make a line of best fit. So if you're in my class, I've given you this set of directions. I'd have it out. We're going to do an example problem. Eventually, we're going to get to a problem that looks like this. So given a set of data, use our graphing calculator to find the line of best fit, interpret the correlation coefficient, so on and so forth. Before we get there, though, what I think is important to help you with the graphing calculator, just so you're kind of acclimated. So the graphing calculator looks something like this. There's a ton of buttons everywhere. What you need to know, the basic functionality of every button, though, is every button usually has more than one operation. So like the button itself, like if I hit the number 4, I will get a 4, right? So you can see the 4 show up there. So again, if I hit the number 4, a 4 is going to come up on my screen. But you'll notice above every button is there's either one or two other things in different colors. So for me, the colors are blue and green. For some other calculators, it might be yellow and green or something similar like that. The one I have next to me is yellow and green instead of blue and green. But those little things above the button are other things that that button can do. So if we look at the number 4 here, there's an L4 written above the number 4. So I can get L4 to show up on my screen. Since this is in blue on my calculator, if I hit the blue button first, and then I hit the 4 is not going to show up. What's in blue is going to show up. So I'll see the letters L4 show up. Works with green too. So above the letter 4, there's a green T. If I want that to come up, I have to hit the green button first, and then the number 4. And if I hit that now, a T is going to come up. So every button has those. So you can see here, like this program has a draw above it and a letter C above it. If I want to get the letter C, that's in green, I'd hit the green button first, and then I would get the letter C. Above mode, there's what's called quit, and I think that's just a really good button for you to know. It's kind of the way to get back to the home screen. Resets the calculator back to nothing so you can start the process over. It's quit, so it's in blue, so I'd have to hit the blue button first and quit. So let's say you were doing something where maybe you're in a place you don't really want to be, you kind of got lost, like I don't know where I am, how do I start over? The quit button is your best friend. So quit is in blue, so I hit second and then quit. Now, when you're watching along with me, what you'll notice on the bottom here is it will show you the buttons that I press. So if I hit 9, it'll tell you, hey, I hit 9. If I hit second and then 9, it'll tell you that I hit the second blue button and then 9. If I hit multiple buttons in a row, like if I hit over 7 times or 8 times, 9 times, it's just going to show you how many times I hit it. So if you're feeling stuck, like what did he just press, you can go ahead and look at this key press history or obviously rewind the video. So let's actually use the graphing calculator then to do a problem that you'd be responsible for. So I'm going to use this problem as an example. I'm going to go ahead and follow this information on how to do it. So our goal is we're given the number of people in a room and the temperature in the room. So 0 people, the temperature is 76, so on and so forth. What we're supposed to do first is we're supposed to use our graphing calculator to find the equation of the line of best fit. And that's what this entire page is going to help us do. So before we begin, we want to clear out all the equations in our calculator, because what we're going to do is the calculator is able to display information. It can graph lines, it can graph curves, it can make scatter plots. So the y equals button is up here. If there's any equations in there, like I have one, you can either clear it, so hit the clear button just to clear it, or you could turn it off by going over and highlighting the equal sign and turning it off. For our purposes, I think it'll be best just to clear everything out. We don't want it to make any graphs except for a graph of the data that we have. So we clear out anything that's in the y equals form. Now, just like we did by hand, we have to enter our data to make a graph of it first. So on the calculator where we enter our data, it says hit the stat button. So the stat button is over here. So I'm going to hit the stat button. And it brings me to this. And it says I have to choose the first option. I can either hit the number 1, or I can scroll around to choose the options. So if I want to choose option 3, I could scroll down and hit enter or just hit 3. So for option 1, I'm going to hit enter to option 1. And it's going to bring me to these lists, and we enter data into lists. So it tells us here we put the independent variable in L1 and the dependent variable in L2. So I just have to enter my data here. So my independent variables, x's, are here. So on my graphing calculator, I'm going to go not on top of the list, that's the title of the list, but the contents of the list, I'm going to type in the x values. 0, and then hit enter. And then 1, enter. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I've entered all the x values in L1. And as it says here, we need to go and enter the y values or the dependent variables in L2. So again, looking at my data, I'm just putting them in order. So when the x value is 1, the y value is 76. when x was 1, y was also 76. So I'm just entering the data. So we've entered the data. That was step 1. We entered it into L1 and L2. So now our calculator has the data. We need to tell the calculator what to graph and where to graph it and how we want it to look and all that good stuff. So now we're actually telling the calculator to create the graph of it. So the way that the scatter plot, or where the scatter plot is located, it says hit second y equals, and the calculator is going to call them a stat plot, like stats as in some statistics or data. We call them scatter plots, but the calculator calls them stat plots. So I can see right here stat plot is in blue above y equals. So I have to hit the blue button and then y equals, and I'm in the stat plots menu. Now what you're going to notice is there's a bunch of plots here. Plot 1, plot 2, plot 3. Your calculator can plot multiple things at once. So the first thing I like to do to begin with is make sure all of them are off. So there's 2 ways we can do that. I can scroll down to option 4 and hit enter. It brings me back to the home screen. I can hit enter again. So I've said turn all the plots off. So when I go back into there, they should all say off. If I were to choose option 5 and turn them all on and then hit enter, when I go back into here, they're all going to be on. And I don't want that. Let's start with all of them off. So I've turned all the plots off. Now, for our purposes, we're just going to always use plot 1, so that's the easiest. So I hit enter to go into that stat plot. Now there's a bunch of information here. So first of all, we want plot 1 to be on. So I'm going to take my cursor and make sure it's blinking on the on option and hit enter. So I've turned it on. Now our calculator wants to know what it wants to make a graph of. So which one of these looks like a scatter plot? Well, it's that one. So I'm going to leave that option highlighted and hit enter. Now it wants to ask us, where did you put your data? And again, according to what we said over here, we're supposed to put the x variables in L1, and we're supposed to put the y variables in L2, and that's what my calculator defaults to. If it were different, like let's say nothing was here, well, where did I put my x values? I put my x values in L1. So I'd have to look on my calculator, and I see L1 is in blue above the number 1. So I could hit second, and then the number 1, and I get L1. Same thing, like maybe there's nothing listed here. Maybe L2 was blank for some reason. Well, where did I put my y values? Well, I'm following my directions, and we told ourselves to put the y value in L2. So I can see L2 is above the number 2 in blue. So I can hit the blue button, and then number 2. Now, when it comes to the mark, that's just up to you. How do you want it to plot a point? I always just like using squares, so I can clearly see that's where the data point is. And the color doesn't matter. The color is whatever color you want it to make the dots in. If you don't have a color calculator, it's going to default to black. I'm just going to use, I don't know, I'm just showing you. I'm going to use light blue because that's what I said. Now, what we need to do before we hit graph, if I were just to go look at this, nothing necessarily is going to show up. Like I see something, but we need to set the window. Just like on a graph, we need to set our scale. And when we're working with data, the calculator has a really nice, easy way for us to do that. So when we're here, before we go graph it, what it says is to hit the zoom button. So zoom is right up here. We're going to hit the zoom button. And there's a bunch of options here. There's some built-in ways that the calculator can set the window for you. So option 9 says zoom stat. Again, we're using the stat plots because we have some statistics, which is just data. If we hit zoom 9, it'll automatically set the window to what it thinks is best, and I can see my scatter plot. I can set my window all by myself. So for example, I notice that my x values are just going from 0 to 8. So the window button, if I hit window, it just asks, what do you want the scale on your axes to be? So since my smallest x value is 0, I could just go ahead and set that to 0. What's my biggest x value? So the maximum my x's get to is 8. So maybe I'll just set that as 10, just so I have a little extra room. So this x scale thing is just, what do you want the tick marks to show? So I want every tick mark to count by 1. I want every tick mark to count by 2. Here I have every tick mark count by 5. That's usually not important. When I look at my y values, I can see it goes from 76 seems to be the lowest, and I think 82 seems to be the biggest. So for me, maybe I want to make my y minimum just like 70, and then my biggest y value is 82, so maybe I want to round up to 85. To see your picture, you hit the graph button, and that'll always show you your picture. So again, the goal here is that you're able to see all of your data points in a nice, easy window. So again, I can use zoom 9, which the computer will set for me, or I can set my own. As long as I can see all the data points and I can clearly see the trend, then you have a perfect picture. So we've made it up until here. once we've created our scatter plot, we want to make sure that the pattern in the data is actually linear. If it's not linear, we don't need to do this. What I can see here is this pattern is definitely looking like a straight line from left to right with a positive slope. So what we can do is have the calculator try to find the line of best fit. So to do that, we're going to hit the stat button. We're seeing those commonalities, the stat plot. We hit the stat button to enter our data. But now we're going to go over to calc. So I'm going to hit over to calc, which stands for calculate something, right? We want the calculator to calculate the equation of the line. So we're doing linear regression, and that's option 4. So LINREG stands for linear regression. And you're going to notice it looks like it's slope-intercept form, AX plus B. We use M. We do not want to use option 8. We always want to use option 4. So I can either scroll down to option 4 and hit enter, or I can just hit the number 4. So for me, it's going to ask me, okay, where did you put your X values? I put them in L1, right? That's what we did before. My Y values are in L2. Frequency list is something that you can leave blank. We are not using a frequency list. We have our X and our Y list. Now here it says store the regression EQ. So it's asking, do you want me to store the equation somewhere after I calculate it? And I do. I want the calculator to put it in the Y equals option. So what I can do is I can see, can hit the vars button. If I hit that vars button, as it says here, I can go over to yvar, so variables is what that stands for. And I'm doing a function, and I want it to put it in line or into y1. If you don't put that, that's okay. I'll talk about that again later, but it's just going to automatically store that equation. Then I go down to calculate. So it's going to tell me what the equation of that line is. I just have to fill it in. So I know my equation is going to be in slope-intercept form, so y equals mx plus b. So it tells me the number in front of x is 0.7. So here I'm going to do 0.7. And then the b value is 75.42. So my line of best fit, the equation for it, is y equals 0.7x plus 75.42. And that's what my calculator told me. Now what we need to do, if you didn't, when I go into Y1 now, my calculator will have stored that for me. If I forgot that step, I could simply just go in and type it in myself. So just having the calculator type it in does just save you a moment in time. But then what we want to do is let's go back and look at our graph. So let's hit the graph button, and we should see that line of best fit has all the properties we were talking about. It's going through as many points as possible. It looks like there's about equal number below the line as above the line. So this is the line of best fit. Now what it wanted us to do is identify our correlation coefficient. And when we come to this screen, when I did my line of best fit, it didn't tell me what my correlation coefficient was. Oops, sorry, I hit the wrong button there. It didn't tell me what my correlation coefficient was. So when I did it here, it just gave me the equation of my line. The correlational coefficient is the value of R, and if that value of R isn't on, what we need to do is turn it on. So what I'm going to do to turn that on is go into the second button and hit catalog. And then I'm going to scroll down to the R's. So I'm in alpha mode, so I'm going to hit R. So I'm going to, D. I'm going to go to D for diagnostics on. So when you go down here and turn the diagnostics on, you might have to scroll down to find it. But there it is, diagnostics on. Once you turn that on once, you won't have to turn it on and off again. But for me, I got to turn it on. So my diagnostic on. So now when I go back and calculate my line of best fit using that linear regression tool, my calculator will also include the R value for me. I want to use R and not R squared, but my R value is 0.96. So as we were talking about before, to interpret that, what does that tell me? Well, this tells me two things. It's a positive number, so there is a positive correlation between people in the room and temperature. And then the second thing, the value of that, the number 0.96, that is a strong correlation. So the correlation is strong. So that's a quick little run through on how to do most of the work on your graphing calculator to have it do the equation of the line of best fit.